Over here.
So the federal courts have been very emphatic that the basic rules of the civil service cannot be dismantled for some other agenda. For example, tens of thousands of federal employees have lost their jobs simply because they were in the probationary category. They were probationary employees not because they had done anything wrong, but because they either had just been hired recently or they'd been promoted because they had performed in an excellent way in their prior jobs. The courts have struck that down and restored those people, although shamefully in some federal departments they're saying that they will pay those people, but they won't allow them to work. But in any event, that is not a way around the civil service. Another way around the civil service that doesn't work is to simply describe someone as a DEI hire or a DEI employee. That is not a federal category by which anybody gets hired. And so that has also been a way to try to circumvent the rules of the civil service, but the courts have said no. Under the civil service, people can only be hired for their own poor performance or professional misconduct. And unfortunately, we've been seeing thousands of federal workers who have excellent performance evaluations who've been fired. So I don't know what's taken place in the last several days at the Department of Education, and we're going to have to look into that. And obviously, the workers, and if they have representation, those people will be focused on that. But you know, the forces that are saying that this is being done in a lawless way are winning in court every day. So in terms of programs, obviously Congress adopted a lot of the programs we're talking about, like college student loans or like Title VI or Title I, contemplating that they would be part of the Department of Education. And so to the extent that they're being stripped and relocated to other parts of the federal government, that would have to conform to federal statute. And it may or it may not. We don't really understand what the policy purpose is, and a lot of people fear that it is a part of a program to dismantle not just the Department of Education, but the federal commitment to education. Exactly. So we are going to be zealously watching that to make sure that those programs that the Congress of the United States, the people's representatives, have adopted are effectuated by this department or some other department. We are going to make sure, for example, as Congresswoman Wilson says, that the civil rights commitments that we've adopted are secure. And we're just afraid that they want to replace the civil rights commitment of the federal government with a war on DEI. And those two things don't fit together.
But to answer
Another
your
question,
the court cases stand. So just very quickly, just because I think she's asking a very specific question, the court orders that have been put in place requiring the rehiring of probationary staff stand. Just because they acknowledge that the law exists doesn't mean that they're not breaking it. And the courts have been very clear about that. The court orders that have been put in place over the last several weeks regarding personnel here at the Department of Education must be followed. And I think to the question that was asked, are they following the law? The courts have already weighed in. No, they are not.
and I'll just say, you know, it was in my committee where I got an employee of the Department of the Veterans Affairs to actually admit that Tracy Therrett, that she, even though she signed the memorandum that fired all of the members of the Department of Veterans Affairs staffing, Judge Alsup ruled with that testimony in mind that the memo she signed actually came from the Office of Personnel, OPM, Office of Personnel Management, and said, you know, the Office of Personnel Management cannot direct other departments and agencies to fire people, and therefore those probationary employees that were fired under that authority had to be reinstated. They are dragging their feet. I know of employees that have been reinstated, other employees that are being paid but are not allowed to work. And so there's a very passive, aggressive resistance by this administration. Any more questions over here? You haven't asked a question. Go ahead.